Alright, so what we're going to be doing today, talking about today, is adding some value to our drawings. Now, you might note this is a picture that was taken about a year ago or so. So this was the original photograph. This is just a simple line drawing of that photograph. And right now it's looking pretty flat, pretty undimensioned, I guess you might say. And so we want to help with that illusion of depth by adding some value. And you can see that in the photograph I intentionally lit one side of my face more than the other. So my left side is brightly lit and the right side is in shadow. And that's going to be part of what helps us today with adding value. Now, the one thing though I want you to understand is that doesn't just mean half my face is lit and half my face is in shadow. It's not like there's a line running down the middle of my face. There is each feature of the face as it sticks out or as it's recessed is going to create light, catch light, or cast shadow. And so all of that information is part of what makes it read like a face. The two pencils that you'll have available are the ebony pencil, which I prefer. It's a really soft lead, and the sketching pencil, which will give you a little bit deeper value. So you can choose which of those two or a combination of those you'd like to work with. So I'm just going to jump right in. When we think about the way that light hits the face, we want to think about what sticks out and what is recessed. If you notice, the forehead tends to be a place that's fairly well lit, as long as the hair isn't casting a shadow on it. But the eyes are always going to have some darker value to them because they are recessed behind the brow bone here. And so there's always some dark value. Even on the light side of my face here, there's some shadow around the eyes. Underneath the nose is a place we see shadow because the nose sticks out enough to catch light. So if it sticks out enough to catch light, it sticks out far enough to cast shadow around my nose. And then the mouth is an interesting place too, because typically people assume that the lips would be the same value, but that's often not the case. The bottom lip faces upward, which tends to catch light. The top lip actually faces somewhat downward, which means it tends to be in shadow. And then sometimes the lip even protrudes enough to cast a little shadow right underneath it. And then of course the neck is going to be darker than the face itself. So when we apply our value, we want to think about using the side of the lead. We want to not create dark, lines. We want to create value pockets. And so I'm just going to jump in right here where I start to see some darkness around in that shadow under the brow bone. Now, there's also value in areas that have color, like the iris has color to it, and so it's going to be a dark value. And then, of course, the pupil has some color to it. Now, these folds around the eyes, this isn't just what people say, bags under their eyes or, that kind of thing, or wrinkles. It's just a matter of what's recessed, what's in shadow, and what casts shadow. Okay, so immediately I hope you notice that as soon as we start to add some value in there, we start to see a little bit of depth in this image. This shadow is what makes things fall back, and light is what makes things appear to come forward. The right side, of course, in this case, is going to be substantially darker because it's the side that is not being lit. But it's the same areas. It's under the brow. It's along the lid. And then even the right side of the eye is in more shadow than the left side of the eye because it actually sticks out just a little bit. That the ball of the eyeball is going to stick out enough to catch a little bit of light, and then that right side is going to be in shadow. And I like to put color, some value on that eye early on because otherwise it just looks kind of bizarre. So I think that helps to establish some thing there. Now, the nose is a tricky thing. If you look at my face, it kind of comes in and out in terms of what's lit. I have on my nose, it's a little bit wider right through here, and then it's a little bit narrower, and then around the nostrils it's lit. And so in terms of shadow, it's not a straight line. Kind of comes in and out of value. You just really have to look closely to see where do you see the darker pockets happening. Another thing, of course, is that the nostril is going to be dark. And under the nose, right? So the nose sticks out a little bit. There's this area right under the nose that tends to be in shadow. And then most of us have just this little fold right underneath the nose, which means there's going to be light and shadow and light and shadow, kind of almost like a little accordion right there. And I'm not going to do the whole face. I just want to hit on some places where I want you guys to notice. Of course, the space where the lips are meeting is going to be in shadow. But like I said earlier, the top lip tends to be darker because it sort of faces downward for most people. And then the bottom lip, of course, it's going to be darker than your skin tone typically, but still it's going to catch some light. So I like to leave a little bit of a bright spot there, and even keeping in mind that we are lit from the left, maybe a little bit over further on the left side there. And then under the mouth, it's going to be a place where we see a little bit of shadow. And then remember, it's not a straight line. So even though the face is being lit along the left side, the chin, my chin anyway, is a little bit round here. So we kind of see that happening with the way that the light hits and where the shadow starts to appear. And then of course under the face is going to be in shadow. It kind of wraps up from underneath. And then of course I need to establish the edge of the face and where the neck begins by going substantially darker underneath there. That kind of establishes that edge. But again, it's not a straight line. It kind of has to do with where the light is coming from. And so it does something a little bit like this kind of a direction, if you notice. All right, and then I see my collarbone in there, and that casts a little bit of a shadow. So it's something where you really have to watch closely to see. Sometimes you don't even know what's causing a shadow. You learn a little bit about your face when you really study it, okay? And then don't neglect the side of the face that's lit. Any areas that stick out enough to catch light, stick out enough to cast shadow. So even that left side is going to have some places where there's shadow. And hair, of course, can cast shadow. So some of you will have to pay attention to that as well. Now I'm not going to get into the hair just yet too much. I'll just hold off on that. But I just really wanted to take some time to point out some of the places where people might be surprised to see that value showing up. So it's really important that we make sure we aren't just shading one side and not the other, that we're really taking the time to pay attention to what light and shadow are doing. Okay, so those are some of the areas I want you to take a close look at today. As I'm showing you now, one of my favorite things about ebony pencil is how soft that lead is, and so we can really disguise our pencil strokes by just doing a little bit of blending, and a finger or a tissue or anything like that works great. And just kind of play around with it. It's very forgiving, so if we go a little too dark someplace, we can always come back. When we're done with all of this, we can brighten up some areas by doing a little bit of erasing. Okay?